RadioNOW 100.9's Indy Connection with Emily Metheny.
Hello, I'm Emily Metheny, your host. This week, I spoke with Emily Wood, Executive Director of the Indiana Wildlife Federation, about monarch butterflies and how important native plants are when it comes to the butterflies and our environment. To start, we talked a little bit about the organization, Indiana Wildlife Federation.
The Indiana Wildlife Federation, we've been around since 1938. We are the oldest statewide conservation organization here in Indiana. And our organization focuses on our wildlife work around sort of three pillars of public engagement. We do education, free statewide conservation and wildlife education programs. We do advocacy. So we engage in fish and wildlife policy and promote science-based wildlife management practices. We do that at the state and the national level and the local level, of course. And then we also do action, which is where we sort of get community volunteers involved in stewardship of our natural areas. So we do that in like invasive species removal projects, pollinator plantings, tree installations, sustainable trail building projects. And we use those programs, again, to engage the community in active stewardship and habitat restoration.
One of the conservation efforts that you also work on is the Monarch Butterflies. Can you talk a little bit about, just in general, the Monarch Butterflies?
Sure. The monarch is one of the most iconic butterflies. Most people can identify the monarch because it's, of course, that striking orange and black butterfly that most people can recognize. And its population has been in a pretty steady decline for several years now, since the 90s, since about the late 90s. But there are two. The monarch is really unique because it's for two reasons, mostly. The caterpillar itself is what we call an insect specialist, which means it only eats one type of plant, which is milkweed, which makes it a little bit of a conservation issue when anytime anything is a specialist on something. The other unique thing about monarchs is that they're one of the only butterflies that migrate. And so this massive migration happens all the way from Mexico, and then there's two main what we call flyways. There's the western and the eastern flyways. The western flyway goes up California, and then the eastern flyway comes here and all the way up the East Coast and into Canada. So those monarchs make that whole trip in the course of 1 year. Again, their caterpillars only able to eat milkweed. So if you think about making a trip all the way from Mexico to Canada with only being able to feed your babies one thing, it really points out how much milkweed we need to have on our landscape in order to conserve this species.
Mm-hmm. And specifically with milkweed, it is native to Indiana, isn't it?
That's right. We have several species of native milkweed that occur here. Anything down from the short orange, one of the most popular varieties that you see in people's gardens, which is called butterfly weed, all the way to the common milkweed that we see along roadsides and out in just old mowed fields, which is one of the most dined upon, if you will, by the monarchs. They really love that common milkweed and swamp milkweed. So there's several species that occur here in Indiana, and there's even more species that occur in the southern states, and then some up into Canada. So there's all different species of milkweed, but it requires that all across the landscape so that it can complete its life cycle.
And when it comes to the caterpillars eating milkweed, are there any predators that prey upon them? Because isn't milkweed poisonous?
Milkweed is more what we would call toxic than poisonous. It has to be consumed in large quantities for it to be really harmful to a human or an animal. But to insects, it has a chemical in it called a cardiac glycosoid, which is it can stop the heart of something that consumes it. So there are certain species that are adapted for eating it, and once they consume that species, they tend to become a little more toxic. But there are birds that are adapted to eat them too. So whenever we talk about caterpillars out in nature, we always say the caterpillars are basically nature's baby food. Almost all terrestrial birds feed their babies on caterpillars when they're raising them because they're basically little packets of liquid. So they're packed with protein, and so caterpillars are a food source for almost all of our wildlife. So they do serve that role. So yes, a good number of them are preyed upon. In fact, the percentage of monarch butterflies that actually make it into to becoming an adult is really an astounding number. It's something only like 1% of all the caterpillars that hatch out on the landscape. Only 1% of those makes it to becoming an actual adult butterfly. So you think about, number one, how many caterpillars are then being consumed, but just the numbers that we have to have in order to be able to have those little butterflies flying around. When you see one of those, you're actually seeing kind of a miracle that's the 1% there flying around that's made it.
That's amazing. I didn't know that.
Yeah.
So when it comes to the life cycle, like, I feel like we usually start hearing more about monarchs annually around this time going into the fall when we start really seeing the butterflies about. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, it's really interesting and unique because there's kind of two different kinds of monarchs, if you will. There's the ones that migrate, and those are the ones that we see out on our landscape right now. And you see them just sort of visiting flowers. Occasionally you'll see them laying eggs, and we're starting to see caterpillars a lot now in the landscape. So the conversation starts to heat up in Indiana around July, August, and September when we really start to see them. But when they make it here, when they've made it up from Mexico here to Indiana, why Indiana is so important is because monarchs are made in Indiana. They are reproducing the most here in Indiana, Illinois, and Ohio. When they hit this part of our country, it's sort of their fever pitch of their reproducing time. And so when they're spending time on the landscape here in Indiana in that period, they're not only reproducing here, but there's a really cool thing that happens in September, which is called the super generation. Now, that generation, it stops migrating north, and it heads back south. That's the generation that we tag. Also, we have events in September and October called tagging events, where we go out and we catch the adult butterflies and we put a little sticker on their wing, and we record that number and write down where it was tagged in Indianapolis or wherever we're hosting that event. And then we let them go, and the goal is hopefully that butterfly that's tagged will make it back to Mexico. And there are researchers there that are looking for those tags. And then when they recover those butterflies, which sometimes they're living, sometimes they're dead, but that information that they can get from that monarch, where they've come through, which flyway they've come through, did they come through Indiana, did they come through the New England states, did they come from California, they can tell all of that from those tags. But only that super generation makes it back to Mexico. So the butterflies that we see in September and October are really special because they're the ones that are going to go all the way back to Mexico. They're the same ones that overwinter, and then they're the ones that start the new generation the next year. So that one single butterfly lives about 9 months. But all the other ones that we see in the early part of the summer, the ones that are reproducing and migrating north, those take several generations. So several caterpillars, they'll convert to a monarch, then they'll move a little farther north, and they'll lay eggs, and their caterpillars will move a little farther north. So those generations, they don't live very long. They're only out on the landscape as butterflies for about a month. So that super generation lives 9 months. It makes the whole trip back, and then it starts the new generation of monarchs the next year. So that super generation is why we get so excited in September and October.
Excellent. And so I've been seeing a lot of people on social media collecting the eggs that turn into the caterpillars. Can you talk a little bit about this kind of grassroots volunteering that's happening with the monarchs, and how is that helping?
Yeah, it is. One of the biggest things that we can do right now is what we're encouraging is volunteer activity, which is every single person and every business and every entity. So we're working with the Department of Transportation, we're working with the Parks Departments, we're working with everyone to get milkweed out in our landscapes. So people are doing this at home now. The word is out. This planting milkweed for monarchs has been the mantra for about 20 years now, and people are really doing it, and it's helping. The numbers in our they report the numbers every year. Basically they count the population numbers based on how many make it back to overwinter in Mexico. And so the numbers are showing that people are starting to really do the work. And a lot of people are really interested in the hand rearing or going out and collecting the eggs. It's really interesting. It's a nice classroom activity. But people will go out. You can collect. You can identify some of the eggs out on the underside of leaves of the milkweed plant where the butterfly lays them. Bring them in, and then the caterpillars will hatch out. And it's quite a job to keep feeding those caterpillars. It's really surprising when you start to hand rear some of those butterflies or the caterpillars, just how much they eat. They're really voracious. So it's actually quite a job. But people really enjoy seeing it. It's a really magical process to watch them convert into that chrysalis, a beautiful chrysalis, and then hatch out to that monarch, and then releasing them again. So it's a really fascinating thing to experience, and it's a great education tool. But we do recommend that most people just plant those native plants, support them on their trip, on their big migration. The best way to do that is by getting native plants out in your yard, around your buildings, your schools, your places of worship. The best thing that we can do is get milkweed and other flowering plants out just to support them on their way. Bringing them in to hand rear them is more of an educational tool. There's actually some science that says that when they are brought inside and they're hand reared, not out in a natural habitat, that it somehow messes with their ability to migrate. So they'll still go out and lay eggs, and they'll still reproduce, but it somehow messes with their internal compass. So it's probably not the best tool for recovering the species. The best tool is getting habitat out on the landscape.
And besides the milkweed, you mentioned some other flowering plants. What are those plants?
While the caterpillar is a specialist, and it can only eat milkweed, the butterfly, the adult butterfly that we see flying around, is a generalist, and they will visit many, many different flowers for nectar. So any type of flowering plant is great, but we always recommend native plants. So there's some beautiful native flowering plants: purple coneflower, liatris, coreopsises, all different kinds of flowering perennials will really attract those adult butterflies and feed them. We like to think of them or explain them to little kids as gas stations. You think about them as gas stations when anyone's making a trip. If you think about the difference between downtown in Indianapolis, if you were looking for a gas station, if you were a butterfly looking for a flowering plant versus if you were out in a big field, it would be a lot easier to find a meal probably out there. So we try to put these gas stations in these flowering little oases so that butterflies, even in urban areas, can make it through on their journey.
And if I'm working on building my garden at home, or I'm building like a flower box in my apartment, where can I buy these native plants? Is there a way to support conservation efforts here in Indiana while buying native plants?
Yeah, that's a great question. It's one of the biggest questions because they're kind of hard to find. They are starting to get carried at big box stores. You can find varieties of natives, what we call nativars. Sometimes they're hybridized or crossed with other species. So we call them nativars or cultivars of a native species. They're still good to have in your garden, but we really advocate for straight native species, ones that have not been hybridized. I mean, you can get those through a few different retailers. There's now a grown native icon that a lot of retailers will carry if they're carrying straight species. But we offer a sale through our website, which is indianawildlife.org. You can order kits of 50 plants, and they're shipped straight to your door. So you can get those in different, like if you have a sunny yard, or if you have a wet yard, we have different kits that can help you with your different sun and soil types. And there's a lot of different clubs and organizations. The soil and water conservation districts that every county has, a lot of them hold annual native plant sales. A lot of garden clubs and just in native plant enthusiasts, they have a lot of community-based sales, so they're really popular around the state. If you get on Facebook or if you visit our website, we try to help point out most of the folks that are selling natives.
Excellent. And if someone wants to get involved and they're not able to plant in their yard, but they notice that there's milkweed and other native plants that are growing on the side of a highway or things like that, how can they help protect? Because I feel like we see a lot of mowing that happens and we lose those plants.
Right. Right. We're working with the Department of Transportation on mowing times and when they mow those road times, the shoulders and the medians, so that they're not mowing, especially in September and October when we've got that super generation coming through. So, but the best thing that we can do is, there's two things I'll say. Join something. If you're trying to get involved but you don't have a property or a habitat and you don't have time or you can't volunteer, join something. Join something that does that work. Something like Indiana Wildlife Federation or a number of other great conservation organizations that we have here in the state. Put your money where your mouth is. Help support the organizations that are able to do the work on your behalf. The second thing that I would say that you can do outside of joining something is be an advocate. If you see a roadside that's being mowed that you don't like, you can call the Indiana Department of Transportation and say, hey, this concerns me because of monarchs. I wish that you would be paying more attention to monarchs with the way that with your schedules of your mowing. You can contact your local legislators about that. You can write the mayor of your city and tell them that monarchs are important to you and you would like to see more measures being taken to protect them. So being an advocate for things like that is a great way to help protect the species and help recover that species, even if you can't physically get out and do that work.
Excellent. And then if someone wants to just find more resources on native plants, on monarchs, the conservation efforts that the Indiana Wildlife Federation are doing to conserve everything here in Indiana, do you have resources on your website?
We do. I'm so glad you asked. We have a brand new website. We actually have a domain, indianawildlife.org/monarchs. You can go for monarch-specific information. If you are someone that works for a mowing department or a county, highway, you can filter that for utilities and rights of ways. All different kinds of users. We have all different kinds of resources and information for how to protect monarchs and other pollinators at indianawildlife.org/monarch. The rest of our website, we have a ton of different materials, just generally on how to conserve natural resources, how to create a property that's more sustainable for wildlife and pollinators. And then we also have a native plant database on our website, or if you're researching things to plant in your yard or you're trying to plan your garden, we have a full native database on our website that's filterable and is a really helpful tool for garden planning.
Excellent. And for teachers, teachers, parents, guardians who want to show kind of the life cycle and about the importance of monarchs, is there also a resource there as well?
Yes, they can also filter on that indianawildlife.org/monarchs. You can filter by educator. And so there's lots of different resources on monarch education, how to put on programs, how to do tagging. So there's all different kinds of resources for educators on that website as well. You just search by educator. If you have a monarch event that you want to share, you can also upload your own resources or your own events to our website. So that'll come to me, and then I can approve that event if it qualifies. So if you have an event that you're trying to get out, a community event, please let us know. Put that on our monarch calendar. This indianawildlife.org/monarchs is the resource for monarchs in Indiana. It's a group of the steering committee for the Indiana Monarch Conservation Group. This is one of the goals that we've been working on, is having a central location where we can point everyone for monarch and pollinator conservation resources, events, everything. So please go there and use it.
Excellent. So if someone who is a teacher who is kind of raising the butterflies, they have the little house for them, I don't know what to call it, but the netting with the milkweed, the entire process. What is the view on amateurs tagging the butterflies instead of your organization?
It's absolutely welcomed. You can go to monarchwatch.org and order the tags. There are individuals and hobbyists and cities and states that use the same tagging system. It's monarchwatch.org. So if anyone can use that system, all you have to do is buy those tags, and they're really cheap. It's just a couple of dollars, and you get just a little sheet of stickers that has 25 or 50. You can order however many you want. But it is open for anyone to, it's a citizen science effort. So the more people that can be doing that, the better. There's training that, we can offer. There's a video on our website that shows how to do it without hurting the monarch. So you can look that up on our website as well.
Excellent. And Emily, as we start to wrap up, is there anything else you'd like to add about monarch conservation?
It's a big subject right now. So it's a huge, important moment that we're seeing with a lot of data coming in about climate change and it sort of being a time to act. It's the same with a lot of wildlife species and pollinator species. It's time to act. So what we're asking people to do is come to our website, learn how to be a better user of natural resources, learn how to be a conservationist, learn how to be an advocate, join something, support your natural resources, support your parks departments. We in Indiana have a beautiful landscape. We've got a lot of really cool wildlife, and it's worth protecting for future generations. So if you're looking for the place to jump in with that, become a member or just come to our website, and all of our resources are free whether you're a member or not.
Excellent. And is there anything you want to add about your organization, the Indiana Wildlife Federation, before we close out?
Just that we've been around for a long time. We're an over 80-year-old organization, and we have been around for 80 years because there are so many Hoosiers that are interested in protecting our natural resources, protecting wildlife, protecting pollinators, and we need for that to continue. So if you have listeners that are out there that are worried about climate, worried about our environment, worried about ways to get involved and protect our water, our air, our forests, please, now is the time to get involved. Be an advocate, join something.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Emily.
Yeah, it was great to talk to you. Thank you, Emily.
Thank you for listening, and if you have any questions, comments, or topics you would like to hear more about, email me at emetheny, that's EMETHENY at radio-one.com, or you can follow me on Twitter at EmilyDoesVideo. Until then, have a great week.
Radio Now 100.9's Indy Connection with Emily Metheny.